Hello and welcome to the second Playdate Devlog. This week we tackle problems such as pumping water, drawing text, fire spreading, ladders, and pirates? Okay, maybe not pirates. To begin this week, I started by implementing the ability to aim the hose. This is so that you can put out fires. To do this, I coded for a long time and I took inspiration from pirates and liberated some code from the Playdate Controller Test example that comes in the SDK. This code works by creating a ball sprite on what I believe to be a delta time variable, which is set to 1/20, which is then used to create the move distance and calls the ball's move function using the ball's x position plus direction x times the move distance to move the ball around. It does the same for the y variable. The direction x and direction y variables are set in their respective button down functions and reset in the button up function. Following this, I worked on adding water by turning the crank. I did this by importing the crank and UI core libraries. The crank library allows me to interact with the crank, and the UI library allows me to make the crank prompt appear on the screen. I then create a crank function where I set the ticks per revolution, which is the amount of ticks in one full turn of the crank. I then create a variable called crankTicks, which returns 0 for no tick, 1 for hitting a tick, or -1 for hitting a tick whilst going anti-clockwise. If this is 1, then I add 1 to the water. Finally, I add graphics.drawText with the variable of water and then the x and y positions of where I want the text so that you can see the amount of water on the screen. So now when we are aiming over a window that's on fire and we have water, the fire should be extinguished. This can be done by using some simple trigonometry. Here we use this line of code, which is essentially a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and by having a equal the x position of the crosshair minus the window x position, and b be equal to the crosshair's y position minus the window's y position, then c should be the radius of the hose from the water plus the radius of the size of the window. We then square this so that we don't have to use an expensive square root function to compare the values. What this line of code essentially does is check if two circles, one circle being the size of the window and the other circle being the size of the water hose, and checks if they're overlapping by checking the distance between the center of the two circles, and if it is less than the combined size of the two circles. This would tell us that we should extinguish that window because they are overlapping. Following putting fires out, I made it so that the fire would spread automatically. At first it would choose a random window, light it if necessary, and then if it's already on fire, it would light a window to the either left or right. This caused fire to spread really quickly and could also mean that a fire could start in the top left corner of the building, even if all the existing fires were in the bottom right corner of the building. I changed this so that it only sets neighbouring windows on either side, including above and below, on fire if the selected window was also on fire. This slowed down the fire spreading to a more reasonable rate. I created the fire spreading function by generating a random number between 1 and the size of the array. I check if the window chosen is on fire, and if it is, then I check if the window to the left is on fire. If it isn't, I call the window's set on fire function and the fire's light fire function, and then return out of the function so it doesn't continue for every window on every side. The process is the same for the right window with above and below windows. It's the exact same process also, except I check that the window isn't nil to ensure it's a valid window. This could also be done by checking that the number is within the size of the window array. The fire spreading really brought this together and made it feel like a game. That ends this week's devlog. We're now seeing the base of a game, which means we're basically finished. Or something like that. If you have any tips, tricks or suggestions for me, feel free to share them, and also feel free to share if you've made any progress on your own projects. I'll see you in devlog number 3. Cheerio.